Hello everyone, Storm101 here. Today we'll be talking about potential for a decent severe weather event for most of the southeast later today. We'll also be talking about for more potential severe weather risk for parts of the Midwest, even the parts of the Central Plains later this upcoming weekend to early next week. We're also going to be talking about a big heat wave that could build over parts of the central U.S. as well, which could lead into a blocking pattern. Before we get started with this video, if you guys like weather related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we can have a couple more updates on some of these topics as well for the next couple of days. So definitely stay tuned for any more updates as well. We're going to start with the watch warning advisory display, and there's a decent amount of activity out there. In the western U.S., we got fire weather and wind issues. Meanwhile, in parts of central U.S., there's actually two areas where we are experiencing some aerial flooding problems. There's one in the northeastern part of North Dakota, northwestern Minnesota, and there's another area for southeastern Kansas, southwestern Missouri, northeastern Oklahoma, and northwestern Arkansas, where they're still experiencing some flooding problems after getting several inches of rain a couple nights ago, and they're still experiencing some big time flooding problems. And there's also more flooding issues over parts of the Ohio Valley and the Appalachian Mountains as well. We also have a severe thunderstorm watch for parts of the Florida Panhandle in southern Alabama. We expect more watches to get issued here as the day goes on later today. These are the storm reports from yesterday. Yesterday wasn't really a huge day overall for severe weather, but there's so far been two tornadoes, at least for the tornado report count. Anyways, this only says two. 48 wind reports, 36 hail reports. One of those was significant. So really, overall, wasn't a huge day. We did have some severe storms out there, but really, then again, it wasn't a huge day for severe weather or anything like that of nature. Let's check out the SPC Outlook here for today. We're getting enhanced risk for severe weather for eastern Alabama, most of Georgia, eastern Tennessee, parts of the Carolinas into southern Virginia. There's two areas we're watching here for tornadoes, or in other words, there's two 10% areas where there is higher tornado potential. There's one for east central Alabama into parts of western Georgia. And there's another area for southeastern Virginia to northeastern North Carolina. Damage units will be the main player. There can also be some hail from some of these storms as well. Day 2, which is tomorrow, we got two margin risks. There's one for the southern half of Florida, and there's another area for parts of Nebraska and southern South Dakota. It should be noted that a couple days ago when we were checking out these SPC outlooks here in the 4 to 8 day outlook, some of these days have been 50% risk days. And you notice that today we're backed off in the margin risk. So really over the past couple days, uh, for day 2 and even day 3 too, which if we do check out day 3, there's nothing there. These day 2 and 3 were some of the same days that had a 50% risk area from the 4 to 8 day outlook. So really overall, the good news is there that things have downtrended for parts of the central U.S. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the severe weather risk is not there anymore or the potential is not there anymore. The potential is still there. And we'll check that out in a little more detail here in a little bit. And on day 4, which is Monday, got a slight risk for southeastern Minnesota, western Wisconsin, and northeastern Iowa. 5, 6, 5 through 8, predictably too low at this time. But let's first talk about the southeast for today and the current environment. There's our latest mid-scale discussion here. Severe weather threat will increase across portions of the Florida Panhandle and much of Georgia next couple hours. All hazards are possible. So it seems like they're going to get ready to issue some type of watch for some of those areas. But anyway, these are your significant weather parameters. You can see here the numbers are not really high right now. Generally as high as a 1 out there for most areas, mainly in eastern Alabama and western Georgia. But we do expect some numbers to increase, especially up in the parts of North Carolina and Virginia later today. If we do check out other parameters like surface space K, there's plenty of instability out there. Something I should note here is that there is a lot of instability in place up in the parts of Kentucky. And we do have a surface low that's off to the west here. And this is going to help increase that hail risk for some of these storms out there because there's not much shower thunderstorm activity right now. And you know what? Most models did not show that. So something interesting could occur over parts of Kentucky later today if that destabilization does continue over the next couple of hours, which if you do check a visible satellite, there are breaks in the clouds out there. So that be an area to monitor later today. Because if we do get to see a very unstable atmosphere later today in those areas, it could overperform out there. So that's an area to watch for next several hours. But meanwhile, for the rest of the area, farther to the south here, really generally instability values 1,000 to 2,000. But you get into parts of the Carolinas where values are up to 3,000 in some places. So a very unstable atmosphere out there. Big Sur Cape is not very impressive after. Of course, it's around noon around this time here, so instability values won't be very impressive. But then again, some of these values will increase as the day goes on. Downdraft Cape, there are some elevated numbers out there. Um, Lap rates, low level lap rates are not very impressive out there, but some of these values will increase as the day goes on. Mid level lap rates, though, it's not really there for most of the severe weather risk area, but farther to the northwest, there are some elevated values back to the northwest out there. And here's the supercell composite here. Numbers are not very impressive out there. There's an 8 for eastern parts of eastern Alabama and western Georgia. And talking about wind shear values, sorry to velocity values, the effective layer, there's actually some pretty elevated numbers along the Alabama and Georgia border. And that's going to help increase that tornado risk and really the severe weather risk overall. So that'd be an area to really pay attention to as the day goes on. But bulk shear wise, there's plenty of bulk shear out there in place. So let's go ahead and check out the HER model, which really the HER model, if I'm going to be honest with you, it's not been good with reflectivity so far today. But you can see here um, across the enhanced risk area, there will be some scattered cells out there. Some of those could become supercells. You can see here at Hermal, this suggests one supercell in central North Carolina. There's another one back to the west as well. So you will get some of these isolated supercells that roll through parts of North Carolina and Virginia. And you also got to pay attention to the storms back into parts of Alabama and Georgia as well, where we do have those elevated storm rate of helicity values out there too, which we'll check out here in a moment, those updraft helicity swaths here. But you can see here as we get later in the evening, some of these storms will begin to cluster up. And that's where you're really going to see your damage wind risk increase, is when those storms do begin to cluster up too. As that kind of loads in, let's check out the significant weather parameters. And you can see here, right now, pretty elevated numbers across parts of Alabama and Georgia. But as you look into parts of North Carolina and parts of Virginia, there are some elevated numbers that really begin to ramp up out there. Which, if we do get a sounding in the northeastern part of North Carolina, you can see here, surface-based Cape is pretty elevated, 2200. And there's also some slight capping of low levels too. And that's of it to note too. Story velocity values are pretty elevated in this environment, and there's a good hodograph in place. So really, if this sounded were to be correct, almost a severe weather would be possible. Well, maybe not so much for the hail because the Big Sur Cape is not very high, but surface-based Cape is pretty elevated. So really, conditions in that sounding there will be favorable for damage winds and maybe some isolated tornadoes too. And you can see here, so of course, you're getting the overnight hours. Some of those numbers do begin to decrease out there as well. And let's get a sounding in parts of southern Georgia where there's going to be another area to watch. You can see here, then again, elevated start rate of helicity values, plenty of instability out there. Mixed layer Cape is pretty elevated up to 1700 out there, which will be favorable for some hail. Decent hodograph out there. Really overall, this sounding here, really favorable for all hazards. It's not really a big risk or anything out there. At least to me, it doesn't look like it's going to be a massive day or a severe weather outbreak or anything like that. It just looks like that there will be some numerous storms out there that might be able to reach severe limits, and really damage winds will be the main threat for most of these storms. But the possibilities there's some hail, maybe an isolated tornado too will be possible as well. And here's the updraft Felicity soft track. So you can see there are several tracks out there, and you can see here where we're also watching for parts of Virginia, North Carolina. You can see there's some tracks out there. Not a whole lot of tracks showing up on the HER model for parts of Georgia, which some of them do continue to parts of South Carolina. But there's also another area of a cluster of storm, some updraft Felicity swaths from eastern Kentucky in northeastern Tennessee into parts of West Virginia too. So there are several areas to watch here for severe weather today. But regardless, even if you're in the slight risk today, definitely stay weather aware today. Today could certainly be a pretty decent day out there. And also be prepared to take shelter if necessary out there as well. So that's today's risk out of the way. Let's go ahead and move on to really across the plains here. So really, it kind of starts on Saturday, which this is where I have peak time heating on Saturday here. We're checking out the NAM, and we're actually going to begin off with surface-based Cape. And for Saturday, there's mainly a marginal risk for parts of South Dakota and parts of Nebraska out there. And you can see here, but up in the parts of North Dakota, there's actually not much sign in place. However, as you get farther to the south here in the parts of South Dakota and Nebraska, there are some elevated numbers out there of sign in. That's going to help kind of limit thunderstorm development. There's not going to be a whole lot of forcing out there for some of these thunderstorms to develop. And that's really the main issue here. But it seems like some of the latest runs in the NAM family are backing off some of the sign in values a little bit. So we have to watch to see if that's going to be a trend, because if it does, this could lead to a better severe weather setup for parts of South Dakota, Nebraska, maybe even potentially up into parts of North Dakota, which if you check out the superset composite at the same time, you can see that there are some elevated numbers out there. If we go to, let's get one sounding in the parts of South Dakota, Nebraska. And you did notice that there are some elevated numbers down across parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, but in that area we got a very strong cap in place, and there's a lot of dry air, so you're not going to see much of any thunderstorm development at all down there. But further up north, though, you kind of have that similar issue where you got a cap in place, there's a lot of dry air. However, if this backs off, if it overestimates the cap in the dry air, that could lead to a much better severe weather event too, which you can see here for some of the ingredients. Instability values. Mixed layer is 2200. Downdraft cape is up to 1000. Lap rates is pretty good. Story felicity values are generally anywhere from 250 to about 400. And there's also wind direction of height out there as well. And the holograph looks great too. So if a thunderstorm were to develop in this environment, that's a big if. Conditions can be favorable for damaged winds, large hail, even tornadoes as well. Some of those could be strong too. That's the environment you're talking about here. So it's a big if a thunderstorm or a long thunderstorm were to develop in that environment. It has the potential to bring in some significant severe weather hazards. So it's something to keep an eye on very closely for some of these areas here on Saturday. And it continues to move to the east. Well, not so much to the east, but on Sunday, there's no risk area. But look across parts of Kansas, Oklahoma. There are some very, very elevated superset composite values out there. It's got as high as a 22 out there, but let's get a more accurate sounding out there. Well, actually, let's first go back to surface-based Cape. You got that similar issue here with the sign in, which actually there's not a whole lot of sign in out there, even with some of the higher instability values. That's 6,000 Cape out there. So it's a very unstable atmosphere. But you do have a sort of problem here with the sign in being a little bit elevated, especially as you get farther to the east. But this will be a pretty interesting environment. What you actually notice here, given by the sounding here, it's a very unstable atmosphere. There's going to be some very strong updrafts with some of these storms out here. But something I do notice here is that dew point value is pretty elevated, and there's also not much of a cap in place either. But also at the same time, though, do you have a lift mechanism to get these storms to form? That's kind of one of the questions out there. Do you have some type of lift mechanism to get some of these storms to form? Which is kind of one of the bigger questions. What you could check out here, 850 millbar winds. There's going to be a lot of lift out there for some of these storms out here. So these could be big time hail producers. But then again, is there going to be some type of lift mechanism, which is the big question? Because there may not be much of a lift mechanism for some of these storms to form. Maybe like some type of outflow boundary, a cold front, or warm front. Because where there's not really much of any fronts out there at all out there. Which there is a little bit of a front out there, but there is some capping issues out there. So then again, you're going to have some type of lift mechanism out there to get some of these storms to form. Which you can see out there where you do have a front in place. Yeah, it's a terrible sounding out there. So there's got to be some type of forcing or lift mechanism out there to get some of these storms to form. That's kind of the main issue out there. But it is something to keep an eye on very closely. I mean, you've seen how much instability is out there. So if a storm were to form in that environment, that would be concerning. And it kind of pushes all further to the east by Monday, which actually the NAM model is a little bit slower than what the SPC had a placement on the 15% risk area, which is interesting. Which, if we do check out that sounding in the parts of Iowa, you can see here there's actually no cap in place, and there's not much of a dry area issue towards the surface. Now, there's a lot of dry air in the mid levels here, which will help prevent that very messy mode out there. But conditions can be favorable for some damaged winds, some large hail, even possibly for tornadoes too. So this is going to be another day to really watch for as well. And also, sorry, the frequency values are elevated too. And then again, in Spade values, I mean, mixed layer Cape 5200 is very high for mixed layer Cape. So this is definitely something to really keep an eye on too. And that will be Monday across parts of Iowa, maybe in the parts of Missouri. And there's also some elevated numbers further back to the southwest, which if we go back to surface-based Cape, for some areas, there are some sign-in issues out there. So, and then again, it is something to watch here. And we'll have to see where models trend with this next. And this is going to be a very common occurrence next week, is seeing these very high instability values, 5,000 to 6,000 joules per kilogram, which is extremely high, especially for this time of year. This is something you see in the summertime, not so much way in early May. And that kind of leads to the next topic, is that we are expected to see a big heat wave to come up for parts of the central U.S. This is the 500 millibar height anomaly pattern by Monday. And there's going to be something else going on out there, in that there is going to be this cutoff low off the east coast of the Carolinas. Now, in the eastern Carolinas, you're going to see some cooler conditions from this low. But this low here is cut off from the main jet stream, which is way back this way. So it is really far away. If we kind of go back earlier time here, our jet stream is like up here. Here's our trough here. This is the one that's bringing in the severe weather risks today. That moves to the southeast, and then you get this big ridge that develops to the north, and it completely blocks the system here from the jet stream. So basically, this system down here is stuck. And that's also going to cause a traffic jam, because these troughs out here in the western U.S. cannot advance east. This ridge out here cannot advance east. All this ridge could do is amplify to the north, and that's just making it much stronger. And that's going to lead to a big time heat wave for parts of the central U.S. You're going to be talking record highs for some places out there. Highs could be deep in the 80s, potentially in the low 90s for some areas. Now, maybe not necessarily for the Great Lakes, but for areas, for portions of the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, even further back to the west, could see record high temperatures. It is going to be very warm underneath that ridge. You can see here how long this system here just stays there. off the coast of the Carolinas. I mean, it's just stuck there throughout the week. Now, what would be interesting to see if this system here could become a subtropical low. It's not necessarily a tropical system, but it has some similar characteristics to a tropical low, but still more of a general low pressure system, if you kind of understand that. Or, in other words, it's kind of more of a frontal low, for it to say. But for the most part, it's mostly a subtropical low. But anyway, well, this system here has the potential to become subtropical, which will be interesting to see if that would occur. But he also knows here, it kind of comes back to the west, too. Really until this jet stream here could really get close enough to the system here, this system here will be able to pull further back to the west towards the jet stream. And then finally, it will be out of the way. At the same time, it really amplifies this ridge here over parts of the eastern U.S. But you also got to keep in mind is that we do not know how long this is going to last. This could be a pattern that could last for a decent amount of period of time. So this is something to really watch for over the next several days is to see how long this pattern will stay, because the chances there that this pattern could stick around for a decent period amount of time. And you can see here, we're starting off back on Monday. These are temperature anomalies. You can see here in the western U.S., well below average temperatures. In the central U.S., you got well above normal temperatures. And then in parts of the eastern U.S., you got slightly below average temperatures. You can see here, here's Wednesday here. You got widespread above normal temperatures across parts of the central and eastern U.S. Some places can see 80s, potentially low 90s for highs for some places. And you can see here how these well above normal temperatures do continue, especially across parts of the plains and even into the upper Midwest. It's got temperatures that could be 25 to 30 degrees above normal, which is pretty darn warm out there. Which this is the CPC outlook here for days 6 through 10. And you can see here, we actually have a 90% plus probability for above normal temperatures. We haven't seen that in a long time. But even within that 60% or higher, more than likely you're going to see some above normal temperatures out there. And you can see here how it covers a good chunk of real estate across parts of the central and even to the northeastern U.S. as well. You also notice here where that cutoff low will be sticking around. We'll bring some slightly cooler conditions along parts of the Carolina coast and even down to parts of Florida too. And where we have that big trough in the parts of west U.S., it's going to lead to some below average temperatures out there. Precipitation wise, it will bring some showers for parts of the areas that's within that slightly below average region. It will bring in some showers out there. So really the weather's not going to be the best down there. But as you get farther to the northwest, temperatures will be warmer. It's also going to be slightly drier too out there. So some of us will get a much needed break from the rain here, especially over parts of the Ozarks where we are still experiencing some major flooding problems. However, it's not so much good news for areas in the upper Midwest where they do not need rain right now, where they are experiencing some serious flooding problems up there. So really, overall, most of your severe weather chances for next week, if there would be any, it'll be more focused in the parts of the upper Midwest and the central, even potentially in the northern plains, just like during a typical summer type of pattern, which will be very interesting to watch and see how long it lasts. Which is days 8 through 14. Pretty much a very similar pattern here. Finally, that trough kind of begins to get out of the way, and then above normal temperatures really begin to spread across the central and eastern U.S. Below average temperatures still could continue into parts of the western U.S. And here's precipitation anomalies, wet across parts of the upper Midwest to the northwest, here for parts of the southeast, drier than normal conditions for parts of the desert southwest, Four Corner states, several plains, and even potentially for parts of the Ohio Valley in the northeast. So it'll be definitely a very interesting pattern to watch over the next couple of days. But anyways, guys, this is all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit the like button. If you like my channel, hit the subscribe button. Hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys got questions about this, put a comment section down below. I'll answer you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.